Hi friends, Miss Liz here. I am so sorry about having to reschedule class and having to cancel the live session. Hopefully this video will be helpful in making your enchilada casserole. If you have questions while you're making this, please feel free to send me a message. I'm not sure if you'll be able to post questions in the classroom since the session is technically over and we start again in January. So feel free to send me a message if you have any questions, okay? If you are still needing to do some prep work for things I've already done, feel free to pause the video. That is the beauty of a pre-recorded video, is you can always pause it and resume once you're ready, okay? All right, so this is Mexican, we call it Mexican Fiesta Casserole at our house, and my family absolutely loves this. All right, so hopefully you enjoy this as well. All right, so to start our casserole, we're gonna start by sauteing some vegetables on the stove. I have my peppers already diced up here. I'm just gonna scoop my cutting board out of the way so I can get my skillet. I have a large skillet here on the stove, and I'm gonna turn that on to a medium-high. On my stove, that's like a 6 or a 7, and I'm just gonna drizzle a little bit of oil back and forth in the pan here. Just a couple of teaspoons, maybe a tablespoon of oil. If you're doing fresh onion, half a red onion is what the recipe calls for. You would go ahead and dice that up and toss it in here. I'm actually doing dried minced onion today because my children prefer not to have large chunks of onion in this casserole. So I'm gonna do about a tablespoon of dried minced onion. And I'm just gonna sprinkle that in with the oil. And then I'm also going to take my diced bell peppers here. So I've got a couple of different colors. And then I also have a nice red sweet pepper, which is like the smaller ones. You can buy them. Sometimes people buy them for like snacks. They're like little small ones. So I have an orange bell pepper, a green bell pepper, and then a couple of the sweet red ones, just to give it a little bit more color. So I'm just scooping all of those diced bell peppers into the oil with my minced onion. Set my cutting board to the side. Then I'm going to take my spoon and I'm just going to give these a little stir so that everything gets nice and coated in that oil. Okay. So we're going to let that heat up. Once it starts to get a good sizzle, then we'll add some spices. Now, the directions for this recipe, you can do a couple of different things. The instructions say that technically once we've cooked these peppers, we should pull them off and then do the same process with the corn. The reason the directions say to do that is because we're using frozen corn. And so sometimes frozen corn releases quite a bit of liquid and we don't want to create soggy peppers in here. So it's up to you. You can pull all of this off after it's nice and sauteed and then cook your corn separately. Or you can kind of push all of your pepper mixture to the side and cook the corn while it's in there as well. So I'll leave that up to you. If you want to, after your peppers have been nice and sauteed and seasoned, pull them off into a dish, you totally can. Otherwise, you can scoot them to the side and just cook your corn alongside of it, okay? All right. So while we're waiting on the peppers to heat up and cook, if you don't have any of your other cans opened yet, go ahead and do that. One of the things will be enchilada sauce. So I already went ahead and mixed a can of enchilada sauce with a can of regular tomato sauce to make it so it's a little bit less spicy and a little more mild for my younger children. So you can either use 2 cups of regular enchilada sauce, or you can do 1 cup enchilada, 1 cup plain tomato sauce if you want to bring that spiciness down. Also, go ahead and open your can of black beans and open your can of refried beans. Can you hear the sizzle? My peppers are starting to heat up. Now for the refried beans, because we're going to be spreading these in the casserole, I like to take my beans, my refried beans, and put them into a bowl. And then I add a little bit of water to kind of thin them down, and it'll make it a little easier to spread in our casserole dish. So I'm just scooping out these refried beans, and I have just a couple tablespoons of water here. These Anchor measuring cups are fantastic. They have teaspoons on one side and tablespoons on the other. Really great for liquid measurements. So I just have a couple tablespoons of water that I'm mixing with those refried beans just to kind of thin them down and make it a little bit easier to spread. So I'm going to get that stirred up, and then I'm going to stir my peppers since they're getting a nice sizzle. Great. There we go. So you can see that made those beans just a little bit easier to kind of move around, and that's going to make it a whole lot easier for us to spread. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to scrape this off. It's got a little bit of beans on it. Just going to stir those up since they're getting a nice sizzle. And I'm going to get my seasonings. Now I'm going to use the seasoning measurements in the recipe. I'm going to do half on the peppers and then do the other half on the corn so that they're seasoned independently to make sure there's a good coating on both before we combine them. So what I'm going to do is I have my chili powder and I have my cumin. The recipe says 2 teaspoons of each, so we're going to do 1 teaspoon of each on the peppers and 1 teaspoon of each on the corn, okay? And then we're going to do salt to taste. So I'm going to do 1 teaspoon, use a half teaspoon here, so I'm going to do 2. 1 teaspoon of chili powder and 1 teaspoon of cumin. Half a teaspoon. And 1 teaspoon. 1 teaspoon of each of those. And I'm just going to stir that up so it gets a nice sticky coating on the peppers. Ooh, that smells good. Now, how long you cook the peppers is up to you. If you want the peppers to still be kind of firm in your casserole, then you wouldn't want to cook them too long on the stove because they're going to over soften then when you turn around and bake them. So it's up to you if you want to cook them until just the edges start to look a little tender, or you can cook them a little bit longer to get them nice and soft so they're not so crisp. It's kind of up to you what texture you're looking for. All right. I'm going to go ahead. Got a good sizzle. They look good. So I'm actually just going to scrape all of those peppers to the side of my pan. You can see what I'm doing. Scooting everything to the side. I'm going to drizzle a little bit more oil on this side. And then I'm going to take my frozen corn. Maybe if I can find the tear spot. There it is. All right, I'm just going to dump those in on that side. And I'm going to do my 1 teaspoon of chili powder again. And 1 teaspoon of cumin. Kind of stir that corn up. Until it heats up. Nice and coated. All right. Kind of spread the corn across so that the heat can evenly distribute on that single layer. Throw this away. All right, just wipe my hands here. Okay. If you get a little bit of some brown bits that stick to the bottom of the skillet, just kind of scrape those off. That's okay. Just the seasoning mixing with the stickiness of the oil and the vegetable as it softens up. All right. So once that corn gets nice and heated thoroughly, then we're going to mix all those peppers and corn, and we'll add our can of black beans and get all of that heated thoroughly. And then we'll be ready to layer our casserole. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stir my peppers in with my corn because it's pretty heated. It doesn't have to be cooked too long because it is going to be baked. We kind of just want to take that frozen chill off so that it's nice and thawed and starting to warm. It looks so pretty. As you can see, all of those colors look so good. We're going to go ahead and add our drained and rinsed can of black beans. You don't have to rinse it, but it kind of muddies the color if you don't rinse the black beans, so I usually rinse them just so we can keep that brightness to the color of the vegetables. All right, and then we're just going to give that a minute or so for those black beans to heat thoroughly. And we're going to salt to taste. So this kind of depends on your family preference. We don't do a ton of salt in our house, so I usually just do a nice sprinkle all the way across the pan, back and forth, kind of like a zigzag motion. Nice, even sprinkle, lightly salted. Okay, give that a stir. And then we're just going to let that heat through for a few minutes and we'll get our casserole dish ready. So I've thinned my refried beans. I have my enchilada sauce mixed with some tomato sauce. I'm going to put these spices back in my cabinet. Throw away my can. Make sure you clean up your mess, friends. Put these away. All right, so layering in our casserole dish, I have a 9 by 13 pan here. We've got our refried beans, our sauce, some tortillas. You can do flour or corn tortillas, whatever your preference is. I just recommend doing the small size. If you're going to do flour tortillas, do the ones that are still small, like the size of a corn tortilla. And then Mexican shredded cheese, whatever cheese you want to use is totally fine. I usually just buy Kroger brand Mexican style. Here is my mini rant about using bagged cheese. If you are not using the entire bag of cheese, do not put your hand into the bag of cheese. When you do that, you're contaminating the cheese in the bag. You're adding bacteria that you've picked up around your kitchen. You will cause your cheese to mold if you put your hand down in the bag and then stick it back in your refrigerator. So unless you are using the entire bag of cheese, never put your hand into a bag of cheese. If you're only going to use part of a bag, either sprinkle it out and spread it with your fingers or dump it out onto a plate or in a bowl so that you can pick it up and sprinkle it. But don't put your hands into a bag of cheese because your cheese will go bad. It will mold within a few days instead of lasting until the expiration date. So if you've ever had a bag of cheese go bad before the expiration date, more than likely you put your hand down in it and you introduce bacteria. So don't do that. That's my little life lesson. All right. So these vegetables are just about done. We're going to go ahead and preheat the oven to 400 degrees. Okay, 400 degrees, and we're going to turn this heat off. Give it a little stir real quick. Oh, it smells good. All right, just going to check my layers here on my recipe. Make sure I do these in the right order for you guys. Okay, so we're going to do just a light coating of grease on the bottom of the pan. You can use a cooking spray, whatever you want, just so that when our tortillas kind of on the base absorb some of that sauce, they don't get stuck in the bottom of our pan. All right, so a little bit of oil. And what we're going to do is we're going to put just a little bit of the sauce. I'm going to stir this up. Just a little bit of sauce on the base of this pan. So just a light little drizzle. You can kind of like tip it around. Just a light little coating of sauce there, okay? And then we're gonna take some tortillas and we're gonna layer some tortillas here. Now, it's okay if they overlap a little bit, but usually what I do is I'll lay like a couple of whole small tortillas like this, and then I'll take one and I'll kind of tear it in half to put below to cover the bottom. And then my next layer, I'll put the whole tortilla on the other side and the half on the opposite. That way I'm kind of staggering which ones are the half size. So I've got a layer there of tortillas. Now I'm gonna do all of the refried beans in this layer. We're gonna do multiple layers of the other things, but we're only gonna do one layer of the refried beans, mostly because it's easier to spread and only have to do that once than trying to do it once we've layered a bunch of other stuff. So I'm just gonna dump these refried beans onto the tortillas and kind of very gently spread these out so they're not too thick. Doesn't have to be perfect, just so you don't have like a really large chunk of refried beans in one spot. Kind of use your finger to hold down the tortilla. This is one of the reasons I only do one layer of the refried beans. It's a little easier to have it at the base. Just spread it around. All right. Just like that. Okay? Grab a paper towel. All right, and now we're gonna do half of the sauteed veggies. So I'm just kind of about halfway down the middle. I'm just gonna take and I'm gonna sprinkle these veggies about half of the pan here, all into this casserole dish. This is one of my family's favorites. They absolutely love this one. Okay. So just like that, layer of veggies on top of the refried beans. Okay. And then we're going to do about half of what the sauce is that we have left, just a light drizzle. Just like that. And then we're going to do some cheese. Now, like I said, don't put your hand down in there. If you're not using the whole bag, what you can do is kind of take your bag and you can kind of sprinkle it on. Or you can dump it into a bowl or onto a plate so that you can pick it up. But don't put your hand down in that bag of cheese if you're not using it all. If you're going to use the whole bag of cheese, then go ahead and stick your hand down in there because it doesn't really matter. But if not, save your cheese. All right, now we're going to do that layering process again, but without the refried beans because we already put all of those in. So we're going to do our tortillas again. I'm going to put the whole ones on this side and the half on that side. Just like that. These leaves are falling down. And then we're going to do the rest of these veggies here. Oh, it smells good. Super tasty. And this is a very filling casserole with all of those beans and the tortillas and the corn. Really, really good. I've done it too as well where I've done a little bit of some rice. You can add a little bit of rice in here too if you need, or do that in place of the black beans or the refried beans. If you want a little bit different kind of starch in there, you can definitely do a little bit of rice. It's pretty tasty too. All right. dump that little bit that's left. Okay, so we've got that second layer of vegetables added. All of those are used up. Now we're gonna do the rest of this sauce. We're just gonna do a nice drizzle, just like that. Just nice little drizzle all over. And the tortillas will absorb a little bit of this sauce too when they're baked. Okay. And then we're gonna do some cheese. Okay. Spread that out. Just like that. Nice, even layer of cheese all across the top. And my oven is preheated, so that's perfect timing. All right, now you can cover this with a little bit of foil if you want, if you're worried about it getting a little bit overdone. This only needs to bake for about 15 to 20 minutes until it's nice and bubbly and the cheese is melted. So if you're worried about the top getting a little overdone, you can cover it with foil because we are cooking it at like 400 degrees. And so if you want to cover it so it doesn't get too brown, you definitely can. I usually don't. We don't mind if our cheese gets a little bit crispy on the top. So I'm just going to put this into the oven and I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes and check it. If the cheese is melted and it's nice and bubbly, then it should be good. The main thing is making sure that it's warm all the way through. Since there's no meat in here, we just have to make sure it's nice and warm all the way through and it's not cold in the center. So 15 to 20 minutes, nice and bubbly, melted cheese, and you should be good to go. Let it cool for a few minutes so that it doesn't completely fall apart when you go to cut it and serve it. Otherwise, that's it. Enjoy your dinner. Feel free to message me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.